Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Ms. Ernst.
I have good news for the American people. This Friday night, there will be no government shutdown. Thank you. Because of bipartisan cooperation, we are keeping the government open without any poison pills or harmful cuts to vital programs. A great outcome for the American people.
And happy Sunday, and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Sunday, November 19th, 2023. Val Atkinson has the week off. Cherelle James is here. Hey, Cherelle.
Hey.
Well, Cherelle, this is a special edition of The Deal, not only because you're here, but because we have a guest coming up in the second segment. Her name is Kate Goodwin. She's a childcare advocate, and we'll talk more about her later. And from time to time over the 4 years we've been doing The Deal, we will bring on a special extended guest, and that's what Kate Goodwin is, and we're going to talk to her a little bit later. So stay there. You want to hear this. If you have children in childcare, you got grandchildren in childcare, you know children in childcare, you have a niece or nephew in childcare, it's an important discussion. A lot of times our children get treated different when they go to childcare. So Kate Goodwin is a person who knows about that and a lot of other things. So we want you to listen to what she has to say. But in the meantime, Cherelle, in the lead into the program, we always show the montage of all the news of the week. And one of the things in the montage is that we reached a budget deal. Mike Johnson seemed to do exactly the same thing that Kevin McCarthy did that got him booted out of his job. He reached a deal with the Democrats. Now, either they just didn't like McCarthy or the deal that Johnson made is more palatable. I don't think it's either one of those things. I think the Republicans are in complete disarray. Johnson is a MAGA guy. They're afraid of the wrath of Donald Trump. And so the more MAGA the person, but more palatable to the American people, because nobody knew anything at all about Mike Johnson, is the reason why they reached the deal, because it's almost the exact same deal they had before. So what's up with the shenanigans of the Republicans, Cherelle?
So part of this is that they were saying, well, we're just going to give him some grace. He was handed this. This is not something that he had a whole lot of power over, because it was handed down when he took the seat, and it's just something he had to deal with. So he gets grace, which is like yada, yada, right? In the sense of, you're right. It's the exact same thing that McCarthy got booted out for. But here you're going to say, oh, well, we're going to give him grace because, as if you didn't know that this decision still had to be made, that the can hadn't just been kicked down the road and it was still coming up regardless of who you put in place. I agree with you. I think that there's some disarray. I am more convinced that there is separation happening in the Republican Party. I think there was separation before, and then they kind of all came together, and they're beginning to separate again. And that's causing that disarray that we're seeing, the kind of the madness that we're seeing in that way. And it's interesting, but at the same time, it's sad, because there's a country that needs to be ran. And we expect our leaders to be able to be adults about these situations.
Yeah,
so
but we don't do that here. Here's a clip of Kevin McCarthy supposedly punching one of his colleagues in the back, and then we'll talk about that.
Doing an interview with Claudia from NPR, a lovely lady, and when she was asking me a question, and at that time I got elbowed in the back. And it kind of caught me off guard because it was a clean shot to the kidneys, and I turned back, and there was Kevin, and I for a minute I was kind of, what the heck just happened? And then I chased after him. Of course, he's as I've stated many times, he's a bully with $17 million in a security detail. He's the type of guy that when you're a kid, would throw a rock over the fence and run home and hide behind his mama's skirt. And he just, he from behind, that kind of stuff. That's not the way we handle things in East Tennessee. If we have a problem with somebody, I'm going to look them in the eye.
So Cherelle, these are two Republicans. One used to be the speaker, and he can't walk past this guy without hitting him in the back, and then going off and acting like a toddler and saying, "Oh, I didn't hit him." And clearly, people saw it. He's been known to do it before. He's been accused of doing it before. When we talk about preschoolers in the next segment, it seems like Kevin McCarthy is acting like a preschooler. So I know there's not much more to comment on it, other than the fact that to your point, that they're in disarray, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely in disarray. And I think that maybe there's some frustration. When we talk about human first, we've got to remember that all of our leaders are human first. Now, that's not the excuse. So I'm not giving an excuse for anyone in their behavior, but I can imagine the frustration that McCarthy is having, being booted out for the exact same thing, right? Being booted out for just trying to kind of lead us forward, and then you bring someone else in and they do the exact same thing and now they're praised. That would be frustrating to me. I don't care what individual you are, on what party you're part of. That's frustrating.
Yeah, but he's also like a toddler too. So that's the other part. So what other piece of congressional news before we move on? Our favorite congressman from New York has been indicted multiply. He has 25 indictments. His name is Mr. Santos. Let's take a look at this, and then we'll talk about that.
Now for more on this conversation, North Carolina Congresswoman Deborah Ross, a member of the House Ethics Committee and vice-ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congresswoman, thanks for joining the show. I mean, it is a laundry list of some pretty egregious campaign spending, but let me be clear, campaign money spent personally by Congressman Santos. You just heard Julie Sirkin. Congresswoman, talk about that there was support by the GOP, but do you think we're actually at that breaking point now where the GOP may say, you know what, enough is enough?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this morning. And I want to be very clear. The House Ethics Committee did a thorough bipartisan investigation, and it was a unanimous decision to release this information publicly so that the House could move forward. And as we've seen, the Republican chair of the Ethics Committee has already taken action. So enough is enough with George Santos. He has gotten his due process. He did not comply fully with the Ethics Committee. And now it's time for a reckoning. He has been without any remorse and uncooperative, and he is simply unfit to serve in the House and reflects so poorly on our institution.
So, Cherelle, Mr. Santos is going to get his comeuppance. He says he's not going to run. If y'all don't want me, I won't run for a second term. He has a bigger problem, Cherelle. He has spent campaign money on Tinder and all kind of stuff, buying scarves and stuff online with campaign money. But the Republicans have still failed to remove him. So last part about the Republicans, I don't want to make this a Republican bash session, but they did allow for there's still not enough votes to remove him because the Republicans won't vote to remove. What is that about?
I don't understand it.
That's a good answer, because I don't either. I don't think anybody does. The one speculation that I had, Cherelle, that it had to do with they just can't afford to lose a number. Mm-hmm. And so they might as well, go to the very end, let him get indicted. He won't run, then he'll go to jail. And then they'll all, he'll be a memory. So I'll leave it at that because I don't understand it either. What I do want to do first, though, is remind you, you're listening to The Deal. That's Cherelle James. Val is off this week. We got a special program, In the next two segments, we got a special guest named Kate Goodwin, who's going to talk about early childhood education. We've been talking about early childhood and Kevin McCarthy and his behavior. But I do want to say, Cherelle, you had an opportunity to do something that a lot of people don't do. You went to D.C. I've been in D.C. for the last 6 weeks. I'm finally home, thank goodness, because it'll mess you up. But you had a chance to go to D.C. last week and meet some people. Tell me about your trip to DC and what you were doing up there.
Yeah. So I had the pleasure of being a Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Voices Ambassador, and it is the advocacy portion of the small business program that Goldman Sachs has as an alumni. And it was 60 of us from 10 states that were chosen to go. And so I was one of the leads for North Carolina to go and speak to Congress and the Federal Reserve. Clearly, our message was stop the squeeze on small business. And we talked about access to capital. And so I met with Senator Tillis and Senator Budd's team, as well as Representative Emma Adams. And I got to meet Representative Colin Allred, as I had a friend of mine that also went, Gerald Carr, out of Charlotte, North Carolina, who has a business, was his coach at Baylor. So I got to tag along and meet Representative Allred as well, which was a treat. During that time, they had an appropriations vote. So I got to go to the galley of the House of Representatives and watch that vote take place and just really sit and think about, while I was there, advocating for small business across U.S. It wasn't just about those who were a part of the Goldman Sachs program, but across the U.S. and the access to capital that we needed. And the tighter restrictions that are happening, inflation, the proposal that the Federal Reserve currently has out right now of having the bigger banks have to hold more assets, which means that as a small business, it's harder to get lending in that way, bring more money to the table. And so as I sat in the galley of the House of Representatives, you know, we talked earlier about some of the craziness that's been happening with some of our congressmen and women. And I could see, just sitting there, from our forefathers to now, you know, it puts into perspective the dignity that we should have, our congressmen and women should have, our legislators should have, as they walk on the floor of the House or the Senate, the dignity that should be there, because it is truly a reminder as you sit in there of the U.S. as a whole, of America and the citizens, and the weight of the decisions that are happening in those rooms and how they impact the day-to-day lives of everyone who lives in the United States. And it was interesting to me. It was a moment of reflection, but also I was reminded that it's a job, right? It's a job for them. And so you can lose that perspective when that's where you go and work every single day. You forget the weight of the United States in your decisions and in the way you act and how you represent. And so as I walked the halls and I talked to our congressmen and women, it was just one of those things that was surreal. I'm happy that I was able to be there on behalf of all small business. I am happy to say, Ed, that North Carolina definitely leans in when it comes to small business. And the truth is the consensus across the board was we need less regulation so that small business can just do what we do, you know, and get things done. That pretty much was it. I don't know if it's a once in a lifetime thing, if I'll be back or not, but I enjoyed it. And it was an honor.
Yeah, I know you work with a lot of small businesses too in your daily work, and you're trying to help them get financing and making sure their finances are together, so on and so forth. It's critical that small businesses thrive because that's where people work. I mean, yeah, they're big, large corporations or whatever, but a lot of times those large corporations don't exist had there not been a small business. McDonald's was once a one-person operation or whatever, you know, and we all kind of start that way. Another thing about small business is that I want to remind people we're getting ready to come up to the holiday season. So whatever you do, if you buy gifts and do all that stuff, try to do it with small business if you can. I think that's extremely important. I know you had something else you wanted to add, Cherelle.
I did. As you talk about small business and big corporations, and McDonald's starting with one man. One of the things that I left with each congressman and woman that we talk with is that small business creates half the labor force for the U.S. Half the labor force. So if you don't take small business seriously, right? Amazon started in someone's garage. You talked about McDonald's starting with one person. We're half the labor force. And so being able to sustain, survive, and grow means that we're able to hire. It means better communities. We're working right in the communities and care about the people that are right there, where corporations, sometimes that's not the case, right? Because they're so big in that way, and their reach is wide, where your small business is right there in the community. And so just to speak to just your point of big business starts at a small business level, it's 100% correct. And we've got to be able to survive, not for me to make money personally, but so that I can hire and provide benefits, and childcare can be there for them, which is we're going to talk about in the next segments why that's important, but also so that our communities can thrive and be better.
Yeah. There's a lot in that. Please support your small businesses. Hey, I hear some music in my ear. That means we need to take a break. When we come back, we'll have a guest, Kate Goodwin of Kate's Korner, and she does a lot of other things, and she's an advocate for childcare. It's a really important discussion. Please stay around for it. If you know anybody who works in education, childcare, whatever, please send them the link to this. I think they're going to get a lot out of it. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff, like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Sunday, November 19th. We're barreling towards Thanksgiving, and we're so happy you decided to join us. If you're watching on the podcast, remember, you can always subscribe in a lot of places, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. But if you want to see the video version, the easiest place to go to is Spotify. You want to see Cherelle's lovely face and all of that. Also, encourage other people to subscribe. You can always go to the website, thedealwithedclark.com. There's a link for all the stuff we do, where I write my rants, and you can have a link to our sister show, Connections, which is on Foxy 107, 104. And then you can also go to TDS Radio. It's a 24/7 radio broadcast that has music and all kind of other stuff, and guests and great shows on there as well. So we got a plethora of things for you to subscribe to, and we'd like for you to do that. But in the meantime, Cherelle, we talked about, the news like we do in the first segment. Second segment, I wanted to have a guest on, and her name is Kate Goodwin. If any of you listened to Connections last week on Foxy 107, we had Kate on, but we didn't really get a chance to finish the discussion. And I really want to finish the discussion about early childhood education and a number of other issues. So I'll kick it over to you, Cherelle, to introduce Kate to the Deal listeners and tell us about Kate and what she does.
Yeah, Kezia Goodwin, better known as Kate, is the owner of Kate's Korner Educational Services and Kate's Korner Learning Center, and it's an early childhood education provider in Durham, North Carolina. She leverages 3 decades of leadership experience in early childhood education, as long as with her entrepreneurial spirit, to create a new model that builds access to equitable learning experiences powered by the strength of the community. Her commitment is to justice. Education is certainly her life purpose. And we're just so happy to have Kate on with us today. Kate, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, Kate, like I said, I felt like we didn't finish the discussion on connections, and one of the things that's been bothering me a lot, and I know we talked about it somewhat, is the whole way that our kids are disciplined when they go into settings like daycare. It's strange. I mean, you're 4 or 5 years old, 3, 4, 5 years old, and now you've been taken out of your home, and then this other figure is supposed to be the authority figure, and depending on where you came from, how you interact with adults is different, right? And every individual household is different, but the expectation is all the children are going to behave a certain way from probably from day one. So one of the things that has to happen is that center where the children go into have to be attuned to the fact that these kids have different personalities and come from different homes. So we'll start with an easy question for you. Over at Kate's Corner, how do you make that happen so those kids that are coming in are comfortable and adaptable, and you don't have the same kind of disciplinary actions, maybe, or have to take those same kind of actions, maybe that some of these other commercial centers have to deal with?
Well, I think that to be fair, a lot of those educators learn age appropriate responses to children prior to coming into an educational setting if they're working in a child care center. What's important to know about early childhood, the first 7 years of a child's life, is to understand what stages of development they're in, because those are the times that you manifest those skill sets for that age. So, for example, if they're 2 years old, their no, which they learn that word very clearly at 2 years old, is more not saying defiance, but I want to have independence to learn how to do it myself. You'll start to see them kind of go away from the baby assist and help with feeding or eating or things like that. And they want to put their jacket on themselves. They want to tie their shoes, even though they may not know how to tie their shoes. But around that developmental time, it is them expressing a sense of independence and trying to get a knowledge about what about their world is going on around them. So if you're educated in early childhood, you know that this is that time where they springboard into that independence, and you need to foster a support for that. That is taught in early childhood education 1 or early childhood education 2, depending on your educational facility that you go to. But it is general knowledge that children have different stages that we as adults have to cooperatively and in the alignment of that development approach them in. And I won't have expectations of an infant that I will have of a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old. So many things happen that progressively, we all get to the point where we all know how to walk and we all know how to run and we all know how to tie our shoes at this point, but that progressively happen in stages. And so the expectation is on the staff to know those stages so that they can help foster a good environment for those skill sets that they need to grow, be able to grow in that time. Now, when you say, how do you get, as far as discipline is concerned, in early childhood education, there is something called positive reinforcement and redirection. And so I always bring this back to a very human dynamic. If you were at the grocery store and you were trying to make a decision as a grown person, what you wanted to do, and you have all these choices, and somebody comes and snatches something off of the shelf and just gives it to you and says, here, you play with this or you get this, you have just taken all your power away. You're offended, right? Some might be mad, right? And so we forget that children are humans, and the way that they become good, well-rounded, developed adults is being able to have the power that I believe the Creator gives everyone is choice. And we need to be able to protect that. Now, I'm going to go back a little further, and I might step on some toes here, but this is what I know to be true in my experience. African-American families have gone through generations of protection. They're in a protective mode. I want to protect you from harm because we historically did not know what was coming next. When you think about the slave mentality that is etched in our brains about how we approach our children, we first think about protection. And then we start thinking about choices and things like that. So my parents didn't believe in choice. What are you talking about? You do what I say do, because that mentality keeps our children safe and alive. In our psyche, that's what's going on. Whereas along their counterparts, European children have always been given that choice. So when we get to conflict resolution or making choices or being able to be productive in a community where you can see both sides, that limitation also limits their ideas about how they can push forward. We have to go back to choice. We do that as a professional environment, whether you're a Black teacher, white teacher, Asian teacher, Hispanic teacher, doesn't matter. You are taught to give a choice. So two children are fighting over a toy. You take the toy out of the confusion. You ask who had it. You go through conflict resolution. You might offer another toy that looks just like the other one, depending on the age group of the children and what lesson needs to be learned. But we redirect. So, okay, can you give them 5 minutes? And then when they're done, you can come and pick up the toy and you can play with the toy. But it's not so much of a restrictive fear to keep them safe. And we forget that that is in the back of most of our psyches. So whether you are a commercial childcare center or a mom and pop's childcare center at home, it doesn't matter. It matters that you know how to handle and approach that mentality, and that you help your parents understand that their fears of not wanting them to, be harmed come generationally. I mean, it's just generational. We say things like, don't pick up that baby, you're going to spoil that baby. Well, that's a generational thought process that came through justifiably women who have gone through slavery and didn't know if their child that they birthed yesterday was going to be with them the next day. So it also was a protective measure for us. And we forget, we know those things, but we forget them. And we have to remember that subconsciously, they still live in our whole fiber of our being. And then when we show up in these instances, our children kind of get the brunt end of that protective mode. Not saying that they don't need to be protective or that we've arrived and we don't need to have that measure layered, but you have to remember within the context and the environment that you're teaching them, you have to be able to empower them. And that's a protective environment that I think is the best way to do that.
So you bring up some good things that I don't think that we think about right at the top of our mind of that have been inbred in us. And sometimes we don't even know why they're there, right? Like, don't pick up the baby, you're going to spoil them. Where did that really come from? And what does that really mean? Can you elaborate a little bit on building access to equitable learning experiences? Because I believe that this is one where your passion is, but two, it goes directly to what you're just talking about.
Yeah. Here's the deal is that often in early childhood education, if we are in what we call a childcare desert, in Durham, North Carolina, there is a study that was done by the Durham County government that shows that there is a childcare desert in somewhat of East Durham. Not enough access, not enough facilities that are there for our children to get an early childhood experience. And so that is what I'm trying to solve for. So that is important when you think about what's happening in an environment where you're getting a group of teachers who might have not had a great experience in their own education experience. You're getting them to buy into the understanding that you're providing an opportunity that is different than something that they've experienced. So not only physically being in the space where you can bring about a learning environment, early childhood that is accessible to the children in the environment, but also coming in and having what I know is necessary, which is cultural competence. You need to understand who you are yourself as who you are as a culture, and having expectations within that. You also need to know the balance between enabling, right, and being able to empower. Because sometimes, because we have a child walks in and mom doesn't care, she's doing whatever she wants to do, and when she comes in, she's disruptive. Well, that has nothing to do with that child's choice of being here in that environment. So you also have to leave that space of judgment. My mother always used to say, accept people where they're at, and love them where you want them to be. So it brings about an environment of trust. We forget that that is like the first stage of being able to build a relationship with a child and adult. It doesn't matter. You have to be able to trust, and trust is earned. It's an opportunity for people like myself as a provider and like educators in the classroom to continue to show up in the same way over and over and over again, and bring a trusting relationship, not only with the child, but also then their parents. You can't exclude them. They are their first teachers, regardless of what you're doing Monday through Friday, 6:30 to 6, they got to go home. They've got to be in an environment where you can strengthen them enough for them to know that they're making the best choices possible. But we also have to be respectful that sometimes when they're in our classroom and they exhibit a behavior, that behavior needs to be looked at, because it could be keeping them safe at home and may not work with the rules of engagement in a center. So that is cultural competence. That is not taking the sass out of a little girl who doesn't want to necessarily follow the rules, but that sass might keep somebody at bay from her. And that's something that we have to remember. Those are requirements to know when you're working with our families.
Yeah, folks, if you're listening, that's Kate Goodwin. Cherelle James is here. This is The Deal with Ed Clark. It's Sunday, the 19th of November, and this is a special edition of The Deal. From time to time, we'll bring down an expert, have them talk about an issue. If you can remember, folks, we've had professors on to talk about how baby formula became the drink of choice for Black babies. And it's all started here in North Carolina with a doctor wanting to get more Black people to buy milk and get them off of breastfeeding and being connected to their children, because they saw it as a way of getting Black women to continue to be wet nurses or nannies for white children. They needed to disconnect Black women from their children. So we've had on people to talk about that in a lot of different issues. So we'll continue to do that. I do want you to stay right there, though. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to continue to talk with Kate Goodwin about a lot of issues around childcare, but specifically about Kate's Korner, her place where she works, and how that works and what she foresees in the future for childcare. So everybody stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
Oh, man. I can't believe I'm missing this. Okay, Grandma. I see you.
Don't get stuck at home with the flu. A flu shot is the best way to prevent the flu and its potentially serious complications. It keeps you, your community, and loved ones protected. Don't get flu FOMO. Learn more at getmyflushot.org.
And welcome back to our third and final segment of The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Sunday, the 19th of November, 2023. We got a special guest, Kate Goodwin, on from Kate's Korner, but she does a lot of other things. Of course, Cherelle James is here. Val Atkinson has the week off. Just a programming note, next week for Thanksgiving weekend, we are off. We don't do the Sunday after Thanksgiving, so we won't be here. So go back and listen to or look at some old programming. I will write a piece this week, though, so you will be able to get that this week. But you can listen to Connections next Sunday. We're going to be talking about thankfulness. What are we thankful for? And so if you listen to Connections on Foxy 107, 104, you'll be able to catch that. In the meantime, Cherelle, let's get back to the discussion. I know you had some questions to Kate about her facility and what she does over in Durham.
Yeah, absolutely, Ed. Kate, I know you run Kate's Korner Learning Center, and we talked about equitable access and community involvement, but you're changing the landscape of how childcare is not only being provided, but operated, starting with the staff there and then the impact that has on the children. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and how Kate's Korner is creating a new way of childcare?
Yeah, when we talk about equitable means, I start with the educator. there's so many things that you can go to directly, like how children are marginalized in early childhood, which is definitely an issue that we're trying to solve for in our future locations that we'll have. But what I also know is that with our triangle area, there's 78% African American females who are in early childhood education. I know that prior to COVID, they were making around $11 to $12 an hour, depending. Some people who had a degree were making 12 to maybe 13, maybe 15. That was something that was our pay scale for early childhood providers. And on top of that, when we spoke last week, we talked about how those hours could be $15 an hour, but only 30 hours a week, or 25 hours a week. It's the practices that in early childhood that continue to have the people who are caring for our children being very stressful, financial and emotional situations because they cannot meet their own needs of their selves and their children. So the first thing that we knew we wanted to do was change pretty much the dynamic altogether. We kind of blew up the idea of the structure and the operations in early childhood. And we also embraced what was necessary for our teachers to feel trusted and fortified in what they were doing. So we created what we call the Case Korner Empowerment Model. It's a model that compensates educators $18 and above. And some people say, well, do you pay that if they don't have a degree? And I say, absolutely. I pay that if they don't have a degree. Their degree doesn't define whether their gas and electric gets paid or their water bill gets paid. So yes, I pay $18 an hour as a minimum. I pay 100% of their medical, because if you look at that over time, it's definitely a benefit. Not every one of your employees will take medical, and some people can do this and some people can't. But as a smaller company, we were committed to paying 100% of their medical. We have 4-day work weeks, which I implemented after we started, and it's an amazing source to be able to give someone an option to have a day off during the week and the weekend. It allows them to be able to do simple things like go to the bank or get their car registered or vote or whatever that might be. But those are important for life health balance and mental health support. And in the realm of mental health support, we got a grant so that our educators, I'll just bring this back down to the human dynamic of things, right? We have an expectation that human individuals grown come into an environment and are the best example and have the best patience and have an open-ended flow of love between two individuals. That is a human, adult and then a human child. But we expect that no matter what, which I feel like is unhealthy when you're not doing the work on the other side of it to ensure that that adult is ready to interact with that child and give them the best that they can. So we have a mental health support system in place that helps our educators, just start the day right. We have group sessions at 7:00 in the morning. We are championing each other in our personal and professional endeavors during that time. We might be doing yoga to get centered. And it might be a group that's working on something in specific. But I thought to myself, as an educator, we are burnt out very easily because it is a different thing to be teaching a human, especially those girls who work for me and don't have children yet, right? They're tapping into something a little prematurely that they innately may not have because they haven't had a child, but they are learning something so valuable during that time that recognizes self-awareness. Where am I? And how am I going to be in this environment with another individual? It helps them to check in, to know if they're good or they're not good. Sometimes we don't even stop long enough to do that. But we have expectations that when we are in that classroom, you're teaching a child how to express themselves in a positive manner. And if you're stressed out, you just have things going on at home, you're not bringing 110% of yourself to the workplace. So we basically put that in to be able to help self-awareness become a big part of the development of where they're at, our educators are at. The empowerment model also supports 110% leadership goals. So everyone who comes into the center, our structure is we have a director because the state mandates that we have somebody who is responsible for the facility. After that, we have three lead teachers who are in charge of infants, who are TODS and preschool pre-K. Those three individuals in my center know everything that the director knows. So there's information sharing. It's imperative for the director to have information sharing, because her role in this upside down triangle, as we say, is to support the main people on the floor, which are your educators. You are in a servant leadership position. So your goal is to be able to do whatever it is that they need you to do to support their positioning. And knowledge is power. So if you have to step away and go to the bank and you have a tour, either one of those leads can come in and do a tour and do it the way that you would want them to do it. So it's empowering the responsibilities in the community as a whole that inspire them to figure out if they want to be in leadership. Those who have expressed it, they want to go back to school and get, their degree in something. There is something that just feeds into the ambition of everyone that is on the team. So you may not be a lead, but we have projects that we're doing. We're revamping the outside play space. We're a new facility, so we're trying to decide what the front foyer is going to look like. I put the girls on committees where their interest lies. And I don't need to make that decision as the owner by myself. I can make it collectively, because I have gifted, wonderful, smart women who just need people to give them opportunities to show and express their skill sets and bring them to us. So that's the empowerment model in its totality. And I know that many people who own childcare centers are looking at the dollar and cents, but we got a grant to be able to do the mental health piece. It's just about going out and thinking outside of the box on how you bring those services into your center to support your staff.
Yeah, you're listening to Kate Goodwin. She's got some good information there about how she runs Kate's Korner Learning Center. Kate, as you're talking though, at the very end there, you mentioned the dollars and cents. Childcare is not cheap for the most part. And I'm pretty sure some people have been able to make some good money from doing childcare, and it doesn't always trickle down to the people who are doing the work. A lot of times the childcare center owners are disconnected from that whole experience. They own the place, but they don't worry about the milieu that you're in, right? Making sure that the child is a whole, and also making sure the staff is whole.
Right.
Is there a movement afoot in the country to do the kind of things you're doing? And if not, how do we encourage those other center owners and directors to look into the model that you're doing? Are there organizations that are trying to promote the model that you're trying to do?
If there are other people doing Kate's Korner empowerment model, I'm not sure of it, but here's what I know. It's a disruptive move, but a mandated necessary move. I'll speak to providers. When you're an owner of a facility and this is an investment for you, and you find a director who is qualified by the state, that's just that's the first step. But in order for you to have a childcare center that is healing and nurturing and putting children in a space of empowerment, that takes a whole nother ballgame. That's a different type of commitment. That is human capital being in question. You have to give of your heart, mind, body, and soul to that work. And that's what makes a difference between me or somebody who wants to go and buy a childcare center and have someone else run it. You have to have it's a culture you're building. It's a culture, a new culture. And I've come from large companies, and those large companies have this hierarchy that is in the center, which flips our triangle kind of upside down, right? And you have a director and then an assistant director. And then oftentimes when we do meetings or we do information sharing, we only talk to those two people in the center. And then we depend on those two people to talk about how everyone else is doing versus doing an overall check-in and making sure everyone is good and that everyone feels supported. A number of of things transpire when you're not involved in the day to day. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I was burnt out from operations probably after my year 15 of being in early childhood. But your passion takes you to revamp and remember why you're doing what you do. And after 35 years, I could say, yeah, I got it. Now I got someone who's going to do it. But I realized quickly culture setting and expectation doesn't happen with just one person. It takes everyone. And it has to be a commitment to not just own a childcare center, but to know your role in what you're doing, which is setting up our future, to know who they are in this world and how they will operate.
Yeah. So Kate, this is the other part to this. How do we bottle Kate's Korner in your empowerment model, or are you trying to bottle it? Are you trying to get other people to function the way your center does? Do you go out and speak to other groups, or do you invite people in to take a look at what you're doing at your center?
Yeah, I've been asked to do some consulting to be able to help those environments. And I'm open to consulting. That's never been a problem. I also believe that as we go through this empowerment model, we're going through kind of a research and development stage of the empowerment model to know what works. One of the quickest things that we learned is just because you give people more money doesn't mean that is an appreciation that they have. There's so much more you have to be able to give and consistently give to build the trust. So yeah, I do consulting, and the people can freely call me and say, we're having a problem with attendance. No one wants to come to work. Everybody keeps calling off. I want to be able to make that impact with not only Kate's Korner Learning Centers, but any learning center who is willing to see what it takes to be able to make an environment in which we have. My educators love coming to work. We just had a Thanksgiving dinner last night. Everybody came to my house. We hung out, played games. But one of the things that mostly what you'll hear all the time is, I love coming to work because people accept me for who I am. It's a nurturing environment. It's my peace away from some of the troubles. If I'm providing that in my childcare center, and it's making such a big difference in the happiness of the children and their families, I know that it has that same impact, and it all has a core source of starting from there. But consulting, again, is one way that I do that. I've been asked to come and speak in engagements that talk about the impact of remembering who we are as a people and what we've experienced and how we're showing up in early childhood, and what are the things that we need to dismantle in our minds to be able to empower our children in this next generation without all the limitations we had in our own experience. So I've done some of that. But 9 times out of 10, my nose is in the business of what I do. And sometimes I get great advice that I need to be able to share the information and the passion that I have for it. And I'm open to do that at any time if someone needs help.
So Kate, now I know that Kate's Korner Learning Center is walking out the empowerment model. And you mentioned being kind of still in the research phase of that. But I also know that you have co-founded Truth Education Foundations. That yes. Mission is to expand the research base in early childhood education, as well as develop innovative tools to provide culturally responsive training and coaching services for early childhood professionals. So it is definitely what you're walking out in Kate's Korner Learning Center is there's a foundation behind that's empowering some of those research and development tools. Can you speak to just a little bit? I can't let you get out of here, and we definitely want to get your information for contact. But before we go there, a little bit more about Truth Education Foundation and how it's positively impacting the educational and social emotional outcomes for children from infancy through 3rd grade.
Yeah, Truth Education Foundation was a passion for my co-founder, Kate Jordan Downs, and myself. We came together with a similar story of our sons being marginalized and a desire to expel them from their early childhood experiences. Kate's son and my son are about 20 something years apart, but the same exact story, that he didn't fit into the environment. He's not being compliant. He's being disruptive, when we knew that those things were not true about our children. And if you go onto trutheducationfoundation.org website, you will see those stories that kind of put us in this place of passion. We created Truth to understand what are the falling apart dynamics when it comes to how we're showing up for children of all walks of life. How are we as individuals showing up in that? And then what are the practices right now that are being put in place that need to be disrupted, that need to be changed, as far as what you should expect of a child who may not look like you? How does that child learn? How do African-American children learn, specifically African-American boys? They may not sit crisscross applesauce, hands in their lap the entire time you're teaching them a new concept. They might need to feel that concept. They might need to hear it or see it. There's different ways that we learn, and you can see the research on the different ethnic groups and how they learn, and know that this education system was written prior to us being able to be legally a part of it. So you have to understand, and not many changes have happened since that development. You have to go back and understand who you're teaching, who are you teaching, and how do you captivate them? How do you captivate them in learning? And so for you, that takes a lot of your expansion as yourself. It takes a lot of you to expand. So Truth Education Foundation is trying to notate what changes need to be made. And when we apply these changes, what are the effects that it is having on the educators that we are researching at this time? And then what different methodologies can we use to be able to come to the greater good for the children overall? So the research and development is new. It is taking a life of its own, because we're human. We're really doing this with raw data to understand. We're observing a lot to understand, like, that's not going to work. We need to reel that back. Or maybe we incrementally give individuals an empowerment in their classroom so that they can understand the concept and then therefore be able to implement it in their classrooms better. So we're learning a lot of information from that, and that data, that information, and changing the environment within the operations of early childhood serve children so much better, because now they're being led by people who have growth mindset instead of a set mindset. They have individuals who are sensitive to different ways of learning, and they're culturally competent. There's an identifier that maybe if you don't know something, it's more for you to know, not for someone to change. All of those things kind of happen through the research and development we create in Truth Education Foundation. And our hope is that we will have a curriculum support as far as a program with this data to be able to implement throughout the U.S. as we grow and get it confined.
Thank you so much, Kate, for that. And I knew that you guys are doing some of that background work, right? I know Ed had asked a question and you're like, I don't know who else is out there doing it. But I knew on the other side of that there's Truth Education Foundation, that you're not just doing the practical of the Early Child Development Learning Center, but the research behind that is also happening in that way. I've got one last thing for you. I know Ed had a story about parent advocacy, and that's the other piece that we want to just get really quickly from you. And I'll turn to Ed to kind of tell the story that he's heard about, and then have you talk a little bit about parent advocacy, because when they leave you, you're in a great environment. The kids are learning and things are happening for them, but they can't stay there in early childhood development, right? They can't stay at your child care facility forever, as much as you want to keep them, and they have to matriculate through the other grades. So Ed, I'll turn it over to you to kind of tell the story of an older kid, and then back to you, Kate, on supporting.
Well, and I heard Kate talk about her own child, right? And her other Kate, their child. And the story I heard was in Texas of a middle schooler who overheard some kids talking about, maybe doing something violent at school. And as opposed to going to the teachers, who she did not feel comfortable with because she was a Black child in a predominantly white setting. She had very few friends because they had just moved there. So she told her core group of friends and her mom. And her mom reached out to the principal, but instead of praising the child for, alerting people, and they wanted to suspend her for the entire school year, and was early on in the school year, so they would have sent her to an alternative school. She was a very bright kid, and the mother had to engage a lawyer and do advocacy for her child and sit in front of this principal and all these other authority figures to try to explain that her child was only trying to protect other people. That they said that she was disruptive. That was the first thing, because the mother surreptitiously recorded the conversation with the principal and the assistant principal, and they said, that her daughter appeared to be a disruptive force, which is something that we acquire as a tag very early on as Black children, boys and girls. The precocious little Black girl or is sassy, and the Black boy who won't do crisscross applesauce is defiant, right? And then so it carries on. So how do we help parents be better equipped when they go into setting, whether it's in preschool or all the way up through high school, when you're trying to advocate for your child?
Yeah, parent advocacy is a huge part of it's a part of the journey. Like, you cannot pour in and give all of your energy and effort to the children and not bring their parents along for the ride. Some parents are well aware of their parenting skills. They know exactly how they want their child to be parented, and some people are kind of falling through it. I mean, we have so many people from so many different walks of life who think their way might be the right way until they're introduced to something different. For the first time, when I came to Durham, North Carolina, the first time ever did I ever hear of a group that really focuses in on parent advocacy for African American families, which is the Village of Wisdom, and their model, understanding the Black genius. And one of the things is said is you were their first teacher. You know your child. You know your child and how your child will operate and how they deal with conflict. So if an individual is trying to tell you something opposite of what's going on with your child, the way that you build the trust is to be able to tell your children, no matter what it is, we're going to talk about it. We're going to tell the truth about it. And we don't put punishment before understanding. And I think that brings about the responsibility back on us as parents to know our child, but also know that if something is wrong, that's for us to get exploratory about, not necessarily run to a disciplinary action. Our parents, both my parents stopped going to school in the 8th grade to go in the fields and be sharecroppers. And so at that break of understanding, they saw teachers as authority figures. And if they said we did something in school, the first thing we got was the punishment. There was not a conversation about it. Unless that teacher was blatantly being disrespectful to my parents in a racial charged way, did we get any kind of reprieve from that? And so the first thing that you have to do as a parent is get to know your child and be able to advocate truths about your children. So to ask all the questions. Sometimes you get a story and it's just a one-sided story, but I always would bring my child. And when I was advocating for my children, I bring my child into the room first. To exclude the child and their voice when we need to understand what's happening. When your child's telling the truth. So you're there and they're telling their story and it sounds right to me. And when they say a thing and things get, well, I thought you told me he came at the other boy. Or the other girl, or I thought you said he started this infraction. Did you see this other thing happen? Well, no, we didn't see it. So do you understand what I'm saying? It validates who they are. It shows them that their parents are going to show up for them and advocate for them. And they're doing from a place of knowledge. I had never seen any program like that before in my entire life. And I thought, wow, there are people here who in this world know that it takes us getting back to trusting our own instinct in our children and knowing how to identify how they operate in group and one-on-one settings and building character in the home so that when they're going out and they're challenged with that, they have something as a point of reference to go back to. My children knew that I don't believe in lying. I don't want no white lie. I don't want anything. If you tell me the truth, no matter how bad the truth is, you would not get punishment for telling me the truth because I trust you. And that never has left them. They will tell me the truth, even if it hurts. They will tell me the truth. And that way we get beyond them trying to scurry off and not tell the truth because they're afraid of what we might do. We're their first advocates. We are their first champions. And they need to know it, feel it, understand it, and walk in its boldness every time they walk into a classroom. So the only way that happens is to educate our parents about parent advocacy, to challenge things that they know or feel like may not be true, and then to advocate to make sure that the opportunities. I was telling my niece who is at Howard as a junior, no one came to me in high school and asked me what college I wanted to go to. I had a great grade point average, but no one came to me and said, hey, what school are you interested in applying for? My parents didn't know about applying for college. So that advocacy could have meant the world to me to get off on the right foot and know that I was going and have all the financial aid paperwork done. I had my older brother helping me do that. There was a number of things that they just didn't know. So parent advocacy is a huge part of what we do. We help our parents at this age know what developmentally they should expect. So when they're about to have that other baby and their toddler is clinging to them for life every time they leave or go out of a room, it's a normal behavior because innately something is telling them that something is about to change and there's an insecurity that happens naturally. And so all you can do is start to champion them as the older child and as the older sibling and what their role is going to be when this baby comes and be able to console them in times of uncertainty, so that when you do have the baby, you don't walk in and they got a pillow over it. Because they're like, who is this?
We don't want this new baby, right? Well, Kate Goodwin, so much information. We could talk for another hour, but that's the reason why I wanted you to come on. Folks, this special edition of The Deal, like I said, we do this from time to time. If you have ideas about who we should have on, please don't hesitate to send us guest ideas and topics you want to cover, and we'll certainly do that. So Kate Goodwin, one more thing, how do we find you? Website information, that kind of thing?
Yeah, email is kate@katescornerdurham.com. You can find out what we do at katescornerlearningcenter.com on a daily basis, and you'll be able to meet our staff here soon as we put their personal bios up. And also trutheducation.com gives you an overview of some of the things that we've done in the past and what we plan to do in the future.
Yeah, and remember the programming note, we will not be here for next weekend for Thanksgiving Sunday. The following two programs, which we do every year, we're in year 4 of this, folks, for The Deal. The first Sunday or weekend in December, we do a year in review, begin the year in review, and then the last program of the year is usually in the middle of the month, and we'll talk about, again, some more stuff, year in review, and wrap it on up. So Val will be back for those. In the meantime, come join us next Sunday on Connections. We're going to be talking about what we are thankful for. I think it'll be a little bit different program. Again, please join us for that. Make sure you look at the links on the website for Kate's information. Again, we're building an audience here. We have people from all over the world who listen. And we want to continue to do that. So make sure you let people know they can subscribe to the RSS feed or the podcast on Spotify, Stitcher, whatever. We're everywhere. So we build that audience, and go and read some of my nonsense that I write when I'm mad. That's always there on the website as well. So in the meantime, go out and do something good for somebody today. That's all we ever ask you to do. And we'll see you not next weekend, but the weekend after that. Bye.